34 of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. As always, Zach is here. And with us, this week we have Clint. How you doing, Clint?
Doing fantastic, my man.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. And then our guest this week is, one of the names in Colubrids and Colubroids. So we needed to have this guy on for quite some time, and I'm beyond thrilled to have him this evening, and that is the one and only Jason Hood. So we will be talking shocker Spilotes, but we're going to be focusing this episode primarily on Spilotes pilatus, but before the Tiger Ratsnake. But before we jump into that, we kind of have our typical housekeeping. Just to let the listeners know, Clint and I have decided to record a bunch of episodes in rapid fire to kind of build a bank so we can keep our episode every other week schedule. So it's only been, I think it's been a week since we recorded the last episode, which was with Chelsea. But in that week's time, not much has happened with me. I had a clutch of Hernando County Florida Kings drop. So both of the females I tried to get young out of, don't have the young yet, but have the eggs. So that's pretty cool. And with that clutch, I somehow managed to 100% of the projects that I tried for this summer or season came to fruition. And that's kind of interesting because I really wasn't banking on that. And every time you bank on that not happening, that's when it happens. So we have that for me. And then this time next week, I'm praying to whatever deity you pray to, that I and 22 other people from West Liberty are standing in Costa Rica. I've been battling with airplane ticket BS. It's a great day when you start your Monday and find out that 15 of the 23 people's tickets were canceled. So I've been, it's been low stress environment. Everything's been good, but about 30 minutes before we recorded, I finally heard that we have tickets again. So that's good. It's Wednesday for those who care. So it's been 2.5 days of absolute hell. But other than that, we're doing good stuff tonight, and I am more than ready to nerd out with some snake talk tonight. So that's really all I have. Clint, what's up with you?
So I'd like to say that it's been a laid-back week. But no, far from it. So I think in the last episode, I mentioned that we were making a rather large acquisition.
Yes.
And we did.
I saw on Instagram.
Man. Upside down, right? For some reason, I don't know why. Every video that I post to Facebook and Instagram at the same time, it posts it upside down on Instagram.
Oh, there you go.
No clue. But so in short, what we did was, and I need to give a shout out to a few guys here because I had Bailey Frankenberger from Bailey's Big Boa brand and Joe Uris from Riverside Exotics. The two of them met me here at the shop where we then loaded up and proceeded to drive 9 hours one way, while another friend, Rich of Madhouse Serpents and Supplies, pet store in Ohio, left his house in Ohio to also drive 9 hours, hauling a 24-foot trailer. We met up and stayed the night, got up. I'm blown away because I thought we were looking at a good 5 hours of load time, and these guys knocked it out in like 2.
Nice.
It was, that part was amazing. Got everything loaded. It took every inch of that 24-foot trailer to load all of these racks in. We had all the animals with us, 9 hours back. Then the next day, the complete unload. And that's what my entire time has been spent on is cataloging, first off, because we're power washing all these racks, getting everything as sanitized as possible before moving it into our quarantine area. Got it all in, got it all situated, everything wired up, and making sure temps are going where they need to go. Everything gets put on treated paper, of course, just in case. However, I'll say, after going through one by one, 170 animals, I saw zero signs of any mites or any issues or anything, so that was definitely a big, big plus there. But one by one, getting ID numbers, getting an inventory, getting every animal put away. I'm telling you, it's been a ton of work. We're not done yet because I still have tubs to scrub and more things like that. However, these animals I'm so stoked about.
Yes.
I mean, now while we were unloading, I'm sitting here thinking, I made a mistake because it was so much work. However, it's super exciting because I'm getting to work with some animals I've never worked with before. And it's not like that they are just super uncommon or anything, but Mexican line pines. I've
cool.
Worked with them before. I've got a trio. There's a spotted python in there. Never worked with them. That's neat. I've never worked with rosy boas, and I've got like 25, 30 of them now. It's awesome.
Nice.
We talked last week about the gray bands, and I think there are 50 in here.
Holy crap.
Yeah, all different kinds of localities. There's morse, and there's like 7 of them that are gravid right now. And then the rest, I was like, you know what? I'm not feeding until another few days. Let's pair them up and see what happens. Every one of them locked up within 2 minutes of putting them together. So like right now, that's really cool. But when I'm dealing with hundreds of baby gray bands, it may not be so cool. We'll see if I still like it at that point. But yeah, Subox, I already worked with those. I know I'm going to get a chuckle out of this because I've never said this word. I've read it a million times. I know what it is when someone says it or I see it. But is it Nablakai? Am I saying that right?
Noblakai.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Never worked with those either. And I've got, adult hypos, adult normals, and they're gravid. Arabian sand boas. Never worked with those. They're here. Yeah. And finally, this is one I've had 1 or 2 over the years, but I've never had adults, and I've never bred them. Just, kind of had them in and sent them out. But a trio of Baird's rats. And man, these things are stunning. Absolutely stunning. The male's a hypo, the females are head hypo, but I mean, you're talking full on metallic at this point.
They are very, very cool.
They're good. But that has been definitely my entire week. There's not been a day off in quite some time. And I don't see one anytime soon. So, but that's
hopefully
that's what we got going on.
You get them all squared away. I totally forgot to talk about this, and this is relevant to you, believe it or not. So over the weekend, well, I guess we left on Thursday, and then we came home on Sunday. But obviously, my other world is crayfish, and the state of Kentucky is trying to figure out a way to get their burrowing crayfish, which is what creates all the mud mounds that people have in their yards, and they have them in ditches, and lots of snakes and other herps utilize those burrows they create for habitat and things of that nature. So there is a tie with the burrowing crayfish and herps. But anywho, they were trying to figure out a way to get the state's burrowing crayfish fauna surveyed, and at the same time not necessarily have to give out a giant grant. And so they came up with this idea to do a burrowing crayfish blitz, of which there's like 5 people on the planet that can partake in. So anyway, so I loaded up one of the university vans, and we headed out to Rough River Dam State Park in Kentucky. And then I told everybody that I was more than willing to go where people didn't want to go, which is where the basically swamps were in Western Kentucky. And so I just basically was given a bunch of coordinates the way that field biologists roll, and the organizer said, all right, go here, go here, go here, go here. And I was like, all right, we'll go and we'll do this. And I'm driving around, I'm using Google Maps, I'm not being a good biologist, I'm not looking at Gazetteer, and I ended up in Henderson, Kentucky.
Dude, you're right here.
Yeah, like right across the river, but I didn't realize that until I got back to the cabin.
Zach, you were I literally live 15 minutes from Henderson.
Yeah, I know. I was like, God damn it. And then the next day, we weren't anywhere near. I mean, I saw like Evansville signs, but I wasn't putting it together. I just thought Evansville's the biggest city around here. So obviously that's why I'm seeing the sign. But yeah. But while we were doing that, we're basically going to roadside ditches, and we're look like crazy heathens down there digging holes and everything. And everybody's stopping, asking what we're doing, and it's all well and good. But one of my students jumps down in a ditch, and I know cottonmouths are in Western Kentucky. I knew that they were in land between the lakes, extreme Western Kentucky, and they weren't necessarily where we were. But when your 20-year-old undergrad yells "snake, snake, snake" and grabs a big fat keeled snake out of an aquatic ditch, you kind of have a mini stroke, heart attack, and shit your pants all at once. And it took me about half a second to realize, okay, that's definitely, yes, you are correct. It is not a cottonmouth. And then I started looking at the damn thing, and I realized that what they had caught was a copper belly water snake, which is Nerodia erythrogaster neglecta, if you use the old Latin. The current everybody gave a crap about the revision with the rat snakes. Nobody cares about the name changes that happened with the red belly water snake, but they basically made them all one thing. And there used to be there's 1, 2, 3, at least 4, possibly 5. I'm on the spot and I can't think. But that was the only one that I'd never found. So I got immediately put the crawdads aside and was losing it that we had, that's the snake we caught. And the northern population's actually federally protected. So there's that. And then I went to clean it off because it was covered in mud. And, I'm standing at the edge of another ditch, and there was an even bigger one just hunting, I assume, frogs. So I let it get real close to me, and I nabbed that. So I got to add a lifer to my herp list right across the river from you, and I didn't even realize I was that freaking close. So,
gosh, man, that breaks my heart, Zach. Breaks my heart, buddy.
I know. I thought I might not tell Clint I was this close.
I'm going to take it personal.
Yeah, I know. But no, we got back. I was looking in the map book, doing what I should have been doing in the van, and then I was like, oh, damn. Okay. Huh. So, anywho, that's how that worked.
Yikes,
but yeah. Man. Anyway. All right. So, I think, without further ado, we can just jump in. You cool with that?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So, our guest tonight, like I said before, is Jason Hood. Jason Hood has been, in herpetoculture now for quite some time. Many people know Jason for a handful of different snakes. His blackhead pythons, we'll give those credit at least for now. Then we'll hop back to colubrids. Are well known in the Aspidites community. I know my former graduate student, I get to say that because he graduated, which is cool. Lucas talked to Jason quite a bit when he was working on his thesis with that genus. And then what in colubrid land everybody knows Jason for is the genus Spilotes, and then the neotropical bird snakes. And I'll let Jason say that genus here in a minute because I can never say it right. But basically Spilotes pilatus and Spilotes sulphureus. Jason's talked before about sulphureus, so we thought it'd be cool if we would actually focus on the tiger rat snake tonight. So how you doing, Jason? Everything okay?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
The pleasure's all ours. So I know you've gone over this before, but I think it's well worth giving it another go. So you can give the long version, abridged version, whichever version you want to give. But just tell a little bit about your history in herps.
I grew up in Florida, so we had in South Florida, prior to the explosion of exotics, we just had curly tails, but always catching animals. Then I moved up to Massachusetts where they're if you know where to look, you can find them. I didn't know where really to look other than in one of the ponds with a bunch of water snakes. But I kind of lost a little bit of interest at that time, but then walked into a pet store and bought a corn snake, and that just kind of was the beginning of the end for me. I ended up moving back down here to Florida. I was cleaning pools and stopped at my boss's house to drop off the trailer and found you couldn't tell me it wasn't an okatee. It was such a beautiful corn snake. And added that in with the original was an albino, and then met Kathy Love, and that just really ruined everything. she's just like the sweetest, nicest woman on the planet. And then I got some of her Hypo Everglades rat snakes, and she got out of them and just gave everybody my name, which was just amazing for a young guy. I had a couple pairs of corns and a trio of Everglades and some king snakes, and all of a sudden I have, a major player in the reptile world giving out my name and recommending me to people. That was just amazing. Especially, I think I was 22 years old at the time, and that was huge. And then she outdid herself when I moved up to Chicago by putting a good word into me at the CHS, recommending me heavily there, got me involved with them, and that was like, Florida has a different reptile culture than Chicago. Mm-hmm. There are herp societies down here, but they're not as academically minded as Chicago. So moving up there, like down here, I was literally told by one of my pseudo mentors to not learn Latin names. I moved up there, and that's everybody's like, okay, you're kind of a moron, but we'll let you.
That's how it is for me on this show. Okay.
Well, I'm competitive, man. I'm competitive in everything. I played basketball as a kid, obviously, because I'm tall as can be. And when I couldn't do that anymore, I started Taekwondo. When I couldn't do that, it was when the reptiles blew up. It's just, there's that competitive collector thing. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those things going up there where it was to have people outdoing me on something so simple as just language was kind of a drive. And then my wife's from Peru. I went down there, and if you meet anybody on an international level, all they talk is Latin names because there's way too many common names. You can't have a conversation with somebody from another country without knowing your Latin names, and that's where I really felt stupid. You can judge people all you want from where they come from, but I had a guy that lives in the jungle, still knew all the Latin names, and there I was, Mr. Chicago. My wife's telling everybody I think at that time I was the vice president of the Herp Society, and she's getting us all these zoo connections because that was somehow a big deal. And I didn't know my Latin for anything, and that was kind of crushing. But that kind of made me want to learn at least my species. And that's something I think I have to recommend to everybody, especially on a fairly academic-minded podcast like this. Learn your Latin, and I love that you guys always include it. It's because it's not just it does affect how people look at you, and it does affect your understanding of things as well. Mm-hmm. So it's something huge to learn.
Cool. Sorry,
that was a sideways rant.
Hey, we like the rants, dude. Do it more. Keep going.
But so, anyways, I moved back here to Florida, and ironically, so Zach, we met at Stick Marsh, right?
Yes.
Way back in the day. Yeah. Now I live like a mile and a half from there.
That's creepy.
And I have not been down. I've been down the road a couple times because there's an amazing birding opportunity there. Like right at sunset, every wading bird from 30 miles around comes into one of the islands right there, and it's just amazing. So I brought my mother-in-law there, but for actually herping, the traffic's gone through the roof. They opened up 2 more places you can launch boats from, but it kind of ruined the road. But I just simply have not driven it, but I think one time in the 8 years I've been back, which is just kind of speaks to how much I work.
Yes.
I just work pretty much.
Heck yeah.
So, you kind of talked about your start there, and obviously it sounded like it started with corn snakes, and you had that move with, Kathy Love and her giving that shout out, which that's awesome. I mean, that had to feel freaking wonderful. Is that why you've kind of stuck with colubrids? Is that what moved you in that direction? And
No, so when I was down here, I was doing the jobber thing that I think is people pay way too much respect to in this hobby. Like that's one of the things that drives me nuts is how many people that just flip animals have way too much respect in this hobby. But I would go down to all the wholesalers and buy stuff and sell to all the pet stores. But I actually backed up everything. Anything died, I refunded or replaced the animal. I tried to get all my stuff as clean as I could before I ever offered it to the public. I had my whole thing. And during that time, I had guys offering me to jump in on the, this new thing, the ball python thing. That was like 2001, 2002. And I never had any interest in them. I was always a Colubrid guy. I love the boas. The boas coming in from Guyana fresh. Those were always amazing to me. The venomous were a huge draw because I was a young, idiot, 20-year-old kid with testosterone. So absolutely. But thankfully, I was also smart enough to realize how stupid I was with my fish tanks and stuff around my house, and things getting out. And I'm thinking, you're going to put venomous in your house when you can't keep a corn snake locked up? Like, what is wrong with you? Now, I mean, I could probably pull it off now with proper caging, but I'm also at home way too lax. So I have no desire for the venomous at this stage. But I had guys back then that were offering to get on the ball python. Let's go buy 600 or 1,000 of them, and we're gonna get a 6,000 lot. I'm like, no interest. I've just always been a Colubrid guy, and the ball pythons if I was smart, I would be doing ball pythons because that's where money is. But I just, aforementioned idiot, I'm not interested. I want to do what I like, and what I found. Somebody told me one time, if you're passionate about something, you can sell anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even reptile related. He was just saying, hey, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you believe in your product, you can sell anything. And I think that's really, with reptiles, it's so much easier than anything else you're trying to sell, because if you're honestly passionate about it, there is something you find super cool about the individual animal. That's easy to sell. You can point out, like on a Baird's rat, it's ugly from across the street, but you get up on it and there's a myriad of colors and rainbow and, oh my God, the most beautiful animal on the planet. You can't sell them at a show as babies because they're just gray, unless you slap an adult on the table and you'll sell out in seconds. But it's that education, the passion, the drive to interact with people. And that's where I get more interested, and I find more stuff to do with the Colubrid side of that, personally.
I agree with you there. I think that, not to go too far down this particular rabbit hole, but when you're talking about like markets, you said ball pythons, that's where that money was, right? And can be. And it's, from what I see in these two separate markets, ball pythons and Colubrids, of course, is going to encompass a lot. But there is big money at times in ball pythons, but it's a very fickle market. I would say it's the stock market of the reptile world, where you're gambling on your buy, and it's, if you hit this, it's going to be big, or it could take off. But it also, every time the economy gets a little shaky, the ball python market just, boom. And you get collections up for sale, and it's, but the reason I say it's like the stock market's because if you are someone who does this as a business, that's the time to buy them. That's because everybody's going to be moving things very low. But what I see in the Colubrid side is it's much more steady. When there's a drop in price at all in Colubrids, it's $50. $100 kind of thing, and it holds. And a lot of times, bamboo rat snakes, you've seen them for the same price or higher, that they've gone higher for the last 15 years. They've not moved. It stays there. So I think there's a lot more of a steady piece from the financial side. But to your point, Jason, it's all about working with what you like. If you're going to have any kind of long-term success in this hobby whatsoever, you can't chase the dollars. You have to chase what you're happy about. And like you pointed out, putting a baby Baird's rat on the table, it's going to sit there. What I love is a lot of these types of Colubrids, baby Chinese king rats, same thing. They're ugly as hell. But you get the people that walk up to the table and know what they're looking at. And that's what they've been looking for, that ugly snake, because they know what it becomes. And to me, that's just so much more exciting than walking by and, let's face it, ball pythons look their best like 2 weeks after they shed for that first time. You know what I mean? It just goes downhill from there. They get uglier the bigger they get. And so as babies, they always look real pretty on the show tables. But I just love that whenever you get those people who walk up and they know what that animal is without you even describing it yet. that's exciting to me. It's a different niche. It's a completely different atmosphere.
Yeah, no, it's a different world for sure, but it's the world we're in today, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately, but without ball pythons, there would be nowhere near what we have in the hobby today for money, for anything else, because they are the cocaine of Miami for us here. Without them, that we don't have everything else.
No, you're 100% right. The incubators are out there, all the products that have been developed. I mean, there's so much money that was dumped into this industry because of ball pythons. It opens the door for a lot of the other things that we enjoy. You know, even the importing of the ball pythons that was taking place so heavily. There were other animals coming in with those imports.
The Snyder skinks that you I used to buy them for $1 a piece at those wholesale shops, and now they're way up there in price because they quit bringing them in.
Yeah. So we have a lot to be thankful for when it comes to that side of the hobby, as much as we may complain about pieces of it as well.
My heartbreak, I think, is the same as everybody else. My complaint is the same. It's the handful of guys that you meet in the hobby that you're like, man, you got a great, my buddy Tom Furr up in Chicago had this amazing Honduran collection. And every time I'd see him, there would just be another ball python and less Hondurans. And it just came out, he had no Hondurans. And he had some other cool colubrids. And it just, things like that kind of break my heart, because he's a nice guy. I like talking to him, but I like talking about snakes. And he'll still talk to you about other snakes, but it's his driving focus became the ball python, because that's where his money is. And I got no problem with that, but it kind of it was almost like a little breakup or something, he got a girlfriend and now we're not as close as
There you go.
So things like that. Well, you know what I mean? Like there's a bunch. I'm sure if you're not in the ball python world, you kind of lose some friends to it once in a while.
Oh yeah, it happens. And then it's when it is hard to have those conversations, because you can talk about a ball python, but if you're not in that world, you can't talk about all the morphs.
Yeah, I know. I can't.
Right, and that's really what the ball python conversation is. It's all those morphs, and this is coming from a guy who I've had to get back in it, obviously, with the shop here, and I'm learning a little more as I go, as far as what this morph does, that morph. That and that would make this. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even know that existed last time I was doing this. But yeah, it's different. It's different. You're talking about care. You're talking about breeding tips and things like that when it comes to a lot of the, I don't want to say obscure, but just less commonly bred colubrids. Those are the conversations we're having when we're talking about them. But with ball pythons, it's just, I'm doing this morph to this morph this season. I'm chasing this morph, for 2 years down the road.
And that's where we lost as a hobby, is we lost a lot of people that were keeping other things, those obscure animals. That's what made early 2000 Daytona Expos amazing, as you walk in there and you saw species you never even heard of before. And of course, that's the other thing that people get on my nerves about, is they go, oh, this show sucked. Well, one, I was there, so no, there was different things besides ball pythons. And two, if you want to see something besides those ball pythons, you have to buy something else besides those animals.
Right.
Yep.
I've been to literally 100 shows where people tell you got the best table in the place. I'm like, I made $1,100 this weekend. Thank you, appreciate it. Cost me $9 to be here. I could have done one real job call and made more money, but thank you for that pat on the back. Is that a handful of ball pythons you have? Great to see.
Nice.
I'm glad you appreciate the table, though. So, but whatever. But anyways, let's leave the ball pythons alone.
We've had our ball bashing for this episode.
Not non-bashing. We didn't bash.
Our ball python conversation.
Yeah.
There you go.
To the other 4 conversations we've had in previous episodes. Down the same path. Well, getting away from our good friend, the ball python, and heading back to Colubrid land, I want to talk a little bit, well, obviously more than a little bit, but let's just kind of dive in on Tiger Ratsnakes, if you don't mind. So I have limited. I mean, we have them at the university. We got a surprise clutch, and we've raised a couple. I was coached by when we got the clutch. I reached out to Jason immediately and was like, "Tell me what to do," and did it, and we're good. Most of those young actually ended up getting something and passing, but we have one that survived, and it's still doing great at the university. But Jason has obviously had way more than one. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just hear if you were introducing somebody to Spilotes, not necessarily, I want to keep them, but rather someone with a naturalist that's asking the question, what the hell is this Tiger Ratsnake? Just kind of give your spiel you would give somebody who'd be asking you that question.
Well, they're kind of like a forest edge specialist species, it seems, and they, depending on what range they're in too. Like, so in Mexico, I think they kind of run the niche of the coach whip in Florida, where they're, because that's the Tamaulipas locality that the Gladys Porter Zoo, amazing, vibrant tricolor stock that everybody takes pictures of at the zoos that are all dead now. Those were all captured while they were doing a sea turtle study and turned around and saw them in the mangroves.
That's crazy.
And then they said, hey, to the locals, hey, these right here, get us more. And they ended up with, like, I think 3.3 or something that they brought back as the founder stock. So they were doing a zoo sea turtle study of some sort. I didn't care too much about what they were doing. I was just more interested in what they found and where they found them. But further south, they get to be more like edge specialists. And then the Amazon, they don't get the edge as an option. They're kind of all over the Amazon. But they're just such as captive born animals. They do the puffing, all of them, the fire and axe, the sulfurous, they all do the puffing. They'll all do the cage strikes. They're not bluffs. They'll smack you, but and you will bleed from them if you let them bite you. But if you get them out of the cage, as captive born, they're almost universally placid. They'll still puff for you in hand, so you get these great in hand photos. But I don't get bit by them. If they're in the cage, like I take some bites, or if it's feeding day, absolutely. But to me, they live in that great world where you get all of what you get attracted to in the pictures, the big giant puffs and the bluffing and the tongue out and all that. Always that's not like hognose that just goes away. These guys are always like, no, we're on. One thing that another tangent rant. Let's bash another group of things.
We're not bashing. We're conversing. Remember,
we're conversing.
Racks in these things, in my opinion, should not coincide. One, they're too damn beautiful. They're too active, and most importantly, they are visually oriented hunters. If you walk in the room, they're watching your every move, whether it's out of interest, out of hunger, out of fear, whatever it is on that particular day, and it can go all three of those in a couple seconds, it seems. But they're always watching what you're doing. They're always interested in you. I can't see taking an animal that seems to have that much intelligence and stuffing it in a rack. They're similar to, like, have you ever been in a like I assume you went to George Van Horn's Serpentarium down here when you were down this way.
Oh yeah.
And you go to see that giant, what I think at that time it was like a 13, 14-foot king cobra.
Yep.
And that thing would come across the cage just staring at you. The tigers do the same thing. They have that intense look you in the eye, who are you and what are you doing in my area vibe about them. And that, to me, is just such an amazing thing with them that I can't see ever not keeping them. But you have to have them to experience that, to really get that vibe from them. But I just love them. I love everything about them. They seem to be sexually dimorphic, where the males seem to have stronger keels. But after seeing a bunch of them, not 100%. I mean, it's a secondary sexual characteristic. So people like to try to sex them online and be like, oh, you got a male, you got a female. It's like, you probe it?
Yeah, you should definitely be relying on the probe.
Mm-hmm.
Fire and Axe, you can visually sex adults easily. Fire and Axe will nearly cut you with their keels. They're so extreme in the males. And the females, while they have keeled scales like a yellow rat snake type keels, they basically feel smooth, like a rat snake or a corn snake does. But the males, I think, like when the testosterone hits them or something, they get aggressive ridges. I mean, it is, if you see pictures of adults and you kind of zoom in on their backs, you can easily see a male from a female from that. So I'm bouncing all over the whole group of them, but there's so many cool little details about them like that I'm constantly just enamored with them and trying to pick up other things from them.
Yeah. We have the animals at the university were in a very large walk-in enclosure. It was basically, trying to remember my dimensions, it was close to 9 or 10 feet long, about 7 or 8 feet tall, and then at least 4.5 feet wide. So it was a big enclosure.
Damn, that's amazing.
And it was really fun because we at the school we have to add all these kind of, I don't know what the hell the word is, levels of care, and all the animals have a number, and it's basically like beginner, novice, intermediate, expert kind of deal. And we had the Spilotes were like novice to intermediate, but we had to make them a solid intermediate, and then ultimately they were almost going to be pushed to expert because they would learn who the grad students were, because the grad students do care every day. It's the same person every day. But the undergrads, because we have so many of them, there'd be a different set of undergrads in there literally every day during the school year. And our male in particular was really good at making undergrads comfortable, and then he'd show up, if you know what I'm saying. So he'd be like out on a branch, and he's a big snake. He's 8 feet. I mean, he's not, maybe more now, because this was, 2 years ago. But he'd be out on a branch, and the kids are, we already have some that are snake hesitant. And so they walk into this walk-in enclosure, and then he'd start initially with like the slow, very deliberate tongue flick. And then his head would like lift up off the branch, and that throat swell would happen. And then for certain people, and it was weird because it was repetitive, and that's what I thought was really interesting about it. There were definitely people that he just was like, get the hell out of here. And he'd like get into a striking coil, and then that one person would leave, and he'd like tongue flick, be all defensive, and then go right back to being a snake. And it was always when like the main keeper was in the room. And the only other snakes that I've had that did anything like that were the falsies. And with false water cobras, I tell everybody, when they're adults, it's not until they become adult. When they're little, they bite everything. But when they get to be, half 4 or 5 foot and then up, other than just being complete idiots in the presence of food, they're never really aggressive. We haven't had one that would even hood at people, but they're intimidating because they're so big. But the Spilotes aren't as girthy. But by the end of like that year, when the male got real comfortable with that walk-in enclosure, he had a reputation, which was cool. And it was really neat because there was almost like this weird rite of passage among the students. Like, well, the Spilotes likes me. He doesn't rush me out of there, like bragging right kind of thing. But yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about with that presence.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I need a walk-in cage now.
Yeah, no. Uh-huh. Yeah, it used to be the sloth. We had a sloth at the university, and we shared it with the school, with the school's zoo, the zoo that we work with, which was like 10 minutes down the road. And I would bring this sloth home at night, and it would like run around my living room in the sloth jungle gym that my wife loved so much, right in front of the TV. And then I would like take it, the next morning to the zoo. And basically, long story short, it wasn't great for the sloth doing things that way. And for its welfare, we said, we'll give you to the zoo. But we had built this enclosure that was based around a neotropical rainforest. And I was like, I know exactly what's going in that cage. And it isn't another mammal. And so we got, the Spilotes were purchased and they went in immediately. And then, the rest is history. So, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, they were a ton of fun. So if you don't mind, can you talk just a little bit? And I don't know if this applies to them or not, but I know it applies to someone. This genus Sutsi, that
Sutsis.
if you get older books, but older isn't really that old. Late 90s, you can see that name, and then you see the name Spilotes. And if you're like a snake nerd, you've probably had the moment I had where I'm trying to figure out who is who? Is this name good? What is Sutsi? Is it Spilotes? Like all that crap.
Yeah, so Sutsis, God, I can't think of the guy's name who sunk it. Ultimately, the idiot in Australia sunk it because he wanted to keep it, but the taxonomists, I guess the rules were no, we're all following these same rules. You can't keep it, even though it's a better name than Priornax. Because Sutsis translates into bluffer and liar, which perfectly describes not perfectly because they don't always bluff, but it helps describe the puffing thing. And I don't even know what Priornax translates into. I can't think of the guy's name though, but the gentleman who did sink him was a geneticist.
Oh, gotcha.
So I walked. He is a herper, but he was more genetics than herper. I walked in with the baby Spilotes and showed it to him when he was at the CHS. I'm like, hey, you know what this is? And he's like, is that a lyre snake? Is that? And I'm like, no, it used to be a really cool snake called a Sutsis. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. But it got sunk because Sulphurus was found to be more closely related to Pilatus. So one thing I noted, Pilatus, I don't know if you noticed with yours when they were mating, that's one of the things that the Prima Reptilia made an article about was when they mated, they would do the typical snake courtship, male on top, chasing each other around a bit, but whenever they finally decided to relax and get down to business, the snakes kind of go their own way and the tails stay interlocked.
Yeah.
And you'll have one on one side of the cage and one on the other side facing away from each other, and their tails crisscross opposite directions. And the only thing you'll notice is a massive bulge in the female, because all of these seem to be very proud snakes.
Yes.
And I noted that in Sulphurus. So I was all excited, and the gentleman was, like I say, he was a member of the CHS and on the board for a year. And I came in, I'm like, hey man, what you guys did looks like behaviorally it matches up, man. The Sulphurus breed the same way the Pilatus do. Yeah, we don't look at behavior for taxonomy. I'm like, right, but the behavior matches, and it's it's a fairly unique breeding method. That's amazing, isn't it? He's like, yeah, we don't look at that. I'm like, oh, come on, dude.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that this taxonomist looks at that.
That was the coolest thing to me. But yeah, unfortunately, it got sunk because Sulphurus, for a number of different reasons, looks like they physically also match up better with Pilatus than Spilotes. And actually, something else that he was pointing out to me that you need to work on, Zach. Your little minions. He was saying that at the species level, there's a ton of work to be done right there.
Oh yeah.
He had no interest in doing it, and like where the Mexicanus range down into like northern Nicaragua, he said that they could see that when they were doing the work, but they weren't going anywhere to that species level. They say genus, and they were getting out of there. But it was pretty interesting. He pointed out that for Pilatus, you mentioned you want to talk about range. Pilatus ranges all over Mexico, the southern portion of Mexico, into Central America, down to like Mexicanus rather. Screwing this up from the get-go. Mexicanus all over Mexico for obvious reasons, down into northern Costa Rica. That he said that they were seeing, I'm sorry, northern Nicaragua. He was saying in Costa Rica, each side of the mountain, they were looking like there was some speciation going on there. Something else down in the Panama region on this always screws me with boas, the west side of the Andes. Something else going on there. And then the basin looked kind of uniform, like we see with most everything else. And then the Atlantic slope I asked him about, because there's some really, if you do the Instagram herping and just go by different regions and the different ways you input your search, you find the local common names for them and do those searches. You can find the Sao Paulo area Atlantic slope tigers. Their pattern looks like a northern pine pattern.
Oh, cool.
They're spectacular, big, squarey blotches, and that's also where the sulphurus have the red heads and are tricolor, in which is weird because the tricolor Mexicanus is the complete opposite end of the range, and then the tricolor sulphurus is all the way at the southern end of the range. So it's just a neat way to look at them all. But I would love to see someone actually do some real work on it, because then there's like the striped tigers I have. Those were formerly Argus formis, I think. And there's a few other South American suggested species names that are down there that some people follow. Some people say they see different things, but I don't see it personally, and I'm by far not a taxonomist. But the Argus formis is in Honduras and seems to just be a genetic stripe. So that seems to be something that should be pretty easily sunk, as John Anderman was looking at specimens in the zoo in the museum out in San Diego, and he did a bunch of scale counts, and he said the scale counts are the same for the or within the same range for all the Mexican animals into Honduras and all the Honduras animals, no matter what the pattern type was. So there's no scale count difference. It's just a pattern mutation, which seems to be simple recessive. So that there's like an easy sync there and a couple jump ups. But I'd please pressure. Use that pressure to throw somebody in there.
I gotcha. Well, the thing is, if you look at the range map for these animals, it's very hard to accept that one species of snake, like it's only one taxa that goes from Mexico all the way down through all of Central America, and then through pretty much all of northern South America, and then like the eastern side of Amazonia, the Chaco, all that stuff down into like, I think it looked like Uruguay when I was looking at it. Like that's just such an insanely large distribution. There are plenty of zoogeographic breaks, and there's plenty of areas where things can isolate or be isolated. No, I'm totally with you. All I need to do is get a $50,000 grant, and it can be done.
I'm on it, man. I'll kick you down $50 out of.
Yeah, this is why Kickstarter exists.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I need some rich friends that really like the species, I guess.
Yeah.
So we'll get you funded.
I'm actually really hoping that we may get to see a Spilotes when we're in Costa Rica next week. We're going to Corcovado National Park, and where we start our hike, two of my former students went down. They got a Spilotes there. Professor I know went to the exact same spot. They got a Spilotes there, and so I'm cautiously optimistic, but you also know what it's like to try to find these things in a freaking jungle. There's a lot of vines. And every one of them is a snake the first time you see it.
I think one of Bartlett's write-ups on them, maybe in that Corn Snake and Other Rat Snakes book, I think it was. Either that or one of the Reptile magazine articles. He was talking about just laying around the camp, and a pair of tiger rats that were in mating mode came just barreling through the camp, bouncing through the tree branches and the rafters of the the lean-to and right back out of the camp. And it was just like such a cool way he described the whole interaction, that they were there and gone in a couple minutes and just barreled straight through 20 feet overhead the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, let's jump into some husbandry, if you don't mind.
I was going to say, can we talked about enclosures, and for those of us that don't have a huge walk-in enclosure like Zach, tell me what we do. How do we set these guys up?
I got somebody was selling a rack of 8-foot neodeshas, and I snatched those up in a heartbeat. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to put my blackheads in this. My blackheads need 8 feet of space. And I looked at the tiger rats. I'm like, okay, the tiger rats need 8 feet of space. Absolutely. And I got them set up in those. I wish I had something. Not that I wish to be a strong word. I can go build something outside that's bigger. I got a massive building when I moved, so I have that option. And that's where I'm working towards. Outside of that, I've got a weird 5.5 foot long neodesha I use as well, and then a 6 foot vision cage. When they're smaller, I like the little 24-inch cubes.
Cool.
To raise them up. I think I posted a picture today of a fire and axe that I just brought out for the first time, and that's one thing I'm seeing with these as I'm trying to raise some of them up. The animals I plan to hold back myself, I get them out of the drawers as soon as possible, because while I'm not a fan of racks, they serve a purpose, and I produce a bunch of animals at one time a year. They got to go somewhere. I strongly recommend, if you're buying any of these, especially these strong visually oriented animals, you got to get them out where they're seeing people and seeing interaction. If you ever want to have them in an enclosure that you can appreciate them in, because the animals that stay in the racks longer tend to hide more. They tend to display less. I think there's whatever. I'm not going to get into what I don't like about racks, but I think that getting them out of the racks as quick as possible, if you plan on having them, I think is a huge thing. So just even the 18-inch cubes from all the different manufacturers, Zoom Ed and Exoterra, and them, bunch of branches in there for the babies to get them set up. And ironically, some of the people I've sold stuff to have had a far easier time getting their animals going, because I'm housing a bunch of them. I go from none to 30 or 50 within a couple weeks, and I ship them out to people that have one or two. Mm-hmm. They set them up in Terraria style, and they do wonderful for them. I had one guy like, dude, I don't care if they're feet or not, just send them me, I'll get them going. I'm like, all right, as long as you understand, here's all the things. And I got a couple of videos up to show you how to tease feed Facilinotus. We're kind of on the subject of Pilatus. This doesn't apply. Pilatus are just beasts. They eat like crazy. That's one of the reasons I think they're the most popular of the three species, is because they're like the best suited for captivity. But the Facilinotus and Sulfuris seem to need that planted enclosure to do well, and if you're able to supply that, it seems to pay off in such huge form. They're calmer animals overall. They eat better. They just do better. So I strongly recommend that for the babies. But as they get to be adults, the other thing that people kind of bust me on once in a while is I recycle all my cardboard right into my snake cages. Every cereal box, pizza box, not takeout pizza, but frozen pizza, everything that's a clean cardboard box goes into an enclosure, gets crapped on, then gets recycled. Because a lot of the stuff I keep, and Zach, these things poop quicker than almost anything.
Yeah, and it's not turds. It's like a paste. It's bird poop. They're reptiles and birds are related. They're right there, and they're more bird. They're more bird lizard, and that's something that Ron St. Pierre, when Ron gets on these kicks where he keeps snakes for a little bit and then remembers he's not a snake guy. And one of the things he loved when he had his Pilatus set up is that he said, dude, these things are just lizards without legs, man. These things are so interactive. They even crap like lizards. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm telling you, they're such cool animals. They're super interactive with their keeper. They, like you said, they learn their keepers.
for better or for worse. So definitely I recommend large enclosures. The largest you can do, they're not going to be upset. Obviously, like what you said, you got walk-in size.
Mm-hmm.
So that silly thing people say that the cage is too big for the snake and it scares them.
Mm-hmm.
Never made sense to me ever, and it definitely doesn't make sense with these guys. They'll use every inch of whatever you give them. Lots of branches you can pull out and hose off.
Yes.
They will. And one thing that I kind of started doing almost on purpose is having a water bowl near a climb up branch point, because they seem to climb up the branches, drop, and with their tail being the last thing that goes up, they drop in the water bowl, take a dump, and then move on with life. And I come in there, dump the water bowl, clean it out, sanitize it, throw it right back in there, and that's one less cage I got to clean.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of universal. You touch the water, you got to go to the bathroom, kind of thing.
So, we talked about the branches. When you say like plants, are fake plants fine, or do you have to get like a pothos army, or doesn't really matter? It's just more of the adding the heterogeneity cover to the cage kind of thing.
Yeah, give them nice spots to hide. I cut down. I got a whole bunch of oak trees on the property, so I just chop an oak branch and throw it in there. I'm also not the type that thinks you need to sanitize everything. They'll do okay. That's one of the things that cracks you up. That one of the modern trends is all the naturalistic vivarium with the cleanup crews. But those people are like, I'm going to put all these bugs in here, but I need to clean these branches to not have any bugs on them.
Now, I'm definitely of your ilk there, Jason. I understand that you do run the risk. I mean, you have to acknowledge you could bring something in. But I don't know if I was talking about this last week. I think I was with Chelsea. We recorded with her. But I bought a thing of springtails once at a show, the little white guys, just because I was playing around with a naturalistic cage here in my office at home. And I threw those springtails in, and I think every one of them died by the end of the week. And then I went out, being the naturalist nerd that I am, and I got down to the layer where it's like dirt but wet leaves, and I grabbed a bunch of that crap, chucked that into the Viv, and I still have springtails in there from 4 years ago when I did that. And if I would have sterilized those leaves, all that shit would be dead. And it brought in fungi, which helped with the poo, with the geckos, and everything else. So
that's one thing I so strongly recommend. For if you have, again, that's one thing. New keepers with racks is a pet peeve of mine. Whether you agree with racks or not, new keepers need to have enclosures that can see their animals so they can learn their animals. That should not be something that's even argued. And why would you want to have one snake in a one high drawer? That gets me. But anyways, assuming you have animals in a cage where you can see them, grabbing a handful of leaf litter, non-toxic plants, obviously. I use live oak out here, and throwing that leaf litter in the cage. Not even for what you're saying, just for the enrichment value of it.
Yep.
Your animals will go tongue flick every edge of every leaf you throw in there. And it's just, that's one of those things, I can set up I'm not naturalistic at all. I got aspen for easy cleaning, some branches I cut down, stuck in there, some cardboard, and then I throw some leaves in there once in a while and sit back. And it's everything that everybody talks about being the benefit of the naturalistic enclosure you get from that leaf throw. You throw it in there and they're out there, they're active, they're tongue flicking, they're checking everything out, and they're thinking. No matter what species it is, they're thinking, and they're on some level. And that we need to provide that for these animals.
Oh yeah. I one of my favorite things to do is what you just said. I go out and I get a handful of the duff or the leaf litter, and I chuck it in. And I also will I'll take water and I'll wash the leaves down sometimes, decant the water off of the bucket, so I just have the water, and just kind of I don't know how to explain this over a podcast, but like do a real quick spill in the shape of a J and just add all that chemical enrichment to the tank. You have to do that when you keep things like dry or indigos and crebos and falsies and these big intelligent snakes, because when they get bored, they start to get zoomies and they do these like never-ending loops around the cage, or they just sit. Like those are the two things I see. They're either in the hide box all day and they're not doing anything, or they never stop freaking moving. And then you end up with an obese snake, but these things have to eat all the time, and you have this like, oh shit, I've got to reach this equilibrium state and get them moving again to get them burning the calories, but they need to eat and all that. If they're moving around in an inquisitive way, the way they do when you see a snake on the crawl out in the woods, they're burning calories. They're never going to burn the calories of a snake in the jungle. I'm not saying that, but they're at least up and moving and engaged and doing stuff, and that's what we should strive for, like you said. So I agree 100% on that one.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Jason, one of the things you said that I liked, and because I don't think I've ever really heard someone use those particular words, but when you said, you've got them moving around, they're flicking their tongue, you said you have them thinking. And I love that particular word is what you use, because too often when enrichment is talked about, it's given the connotation of like fluff. You know what I mean? And sometimes it is in the way it's used, I guess, in a lot of conversations about reptiles and enrichment. But stating it the way that you just did, it's not just about the movement. It's you're getting that reptile thinking. And I liked that. That's a really good point.
If you have an animal escape its enclosure and you don't fix that escape route, they're going right back to it. They're learning. The fact that we don't have a scale to judge their intelligence does not mean they're by default not intelligent creatures. They're incredibly intelligent animals, especially if you give them the opportunity to show it to you. But the fact that they can't run a labyrinth for us like a rat doesn't mean they're not intelligent. And people like, oh, you're I'm drawing the blank on the giving them human values.
Anthropomorphism.
Thank you. You're anthropomorphizing them. Obviously, I'm not that smart, but that's not it at all. They are by default an intelligent creature. They wouldn't survive in the wild. They can't just be big dumb eating machines like people try to represent them as. They have to have the wariness, the awareness of predators and prey and what they can and can't do. And we show a little bit of a lack of respect in the hobby to some of these animals. And I mean, even to the ball python, feel, oh, they're a big dumb rock. The way they're set up in captivity, sure. But in the wild, they're climbing trees, eating birds, but only when the birds are coming in on the migration route. Like they're actively doing things that are outside the scope of what we give them credit for. So, but with tiger rats, there's no question they're intelligent. I mean that visually, any of the visually oriented animals, the garter snake the same way. They're visually oriented. They interact with you, and I think people say, oh, these are smarter. But they just express it in a different way where we can appreciate their intelligence.
Yep. So, yeah, that was a wonderful little tangent. I like that.
It was. That was a fun one. I like it. That's good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff.
So, when it comes to heating them, I'm assuming that you use lights or a heat panel or something of that nature if you've got them in enclosures.
Yeah, I'm using lights. I'm a old school. I like heat lights.
I am too.
1-800-bulbs is a great little webpage to go on to get bulbs cheap. You can, because it's getting hard to find incandescent bulbs. So you got to buy them in from China. They're not all great. Some of them are burned out right away. A bunch of the damn things pop off their bases and damn near electrocute you. So if you get the cheap bulbs from China, let me strongly recommend you unplug before you change the bulbs. But we're running. I mean, I'm just not paying reptile bulb pricing for a heat bulb.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm going to recommend that, let me fully recommend unplugging the thing. I just go. you're getting to the question, what do you heat them to? 40 to 60 watts. I have no idea what the temperature is. Again, if you're watching your animals, the animals that are sitting underneath the heat constantly are too cold. The ones that are never in the heat are too hot. And if they go in and out the heat, you did it right.
Yep.
If they're using their enclosure, you did it right. I mean, that's I frustrate people. It's like, well, what humidity do you do? Where they shed? I mean, I don't have a hydrometer. What would it be? I don't even know what you would call them.
I'm with you 100% there. I mean, everything from subox to Brazilian rainbow boas. I don't think I've ever measured humidity. It's always been, are they doing their shed cycles the way they need to be? How does the substrate look? I'm with you 100% on that one.
Well, and I get why people want care sheets. I wanted care sheets as well, but I also wanted books. I wanted to read stuff, and I wanted to find out about the natural animal where they naturally occur. And people will say, "Hey, well, do you have a care sheet for any of these, the puffing snake complex?" And I said, "Well, they're an edge forest specialist. They're nest raiders. They're day active to crepuscular, and they live, mostly in the Central and South America." So it's kind of subtropical. And they're like, okay, well, what are the setups? I just told you. But even that, like, when you tell people they're from South America or Central America, from the rainforest or rainforest edge, okay, so they need to be like 90, 100 degrees in the hot spot? No. They need cooler than that. The rainforest is not really hot. Where they cut down the rainforest, that's hot. But the rainforest itself is high humidity and mid 80s. It's not, you're not getting those super high temperatures. You can give it to them as long as you give them the other part of it. Let them move. So I'm not a care sheet guy. I'm a observe your animal and make adjustments guy. Because the giant issue with the care sheet, and I'm always willing to help everybody. Like on blackheads, I've helped numerous guys get their snakes to hatch. That's the big thing, is blackheads getting the eggs to hatch. But I can tell you what I do, and I can look at what you're doing and where you're having issues, but I can't tell you how to do what you need to do at your house. Your house is not my house. You don't have the same humidity, the same baseline temperature of your room, elevation. There's all sorts of things that come into play. So that's what I don't like about care sheets, because you follow care sheet to the letter, you're failing your animal, because your house is not the same as the guy who wrote the care sheet.
Right.
So I don't know. I think I think we're all on that same 90s, early 2000 come up, and that's what we did, because that was kind of in the modern people. And I almost said modern kids, but it's not modern kids. It's everybody in the modern era coming in now wants it too simplified to where they're missing the intangents that they need to learn. So
that nuance is
that's a better word.
That's the way that's I desperately try to get that through to the students when I'm teaching them. Is that it's not just one, like, it's not a hot spot, like a hot spot of 85. What that really means is you can have a hot spot of 90 if there's enough room in the enclosure for that heat to dissipate. And at the far end of it, it's 70. So what that really means is you've got a gradient of 70 to 90, and the snake's going to be able to find the temperature at once there. But one of the things I've noticed is that people read those things so freaking literal that they're sitting there with their hygrometer and they're like having a freaking anxiety attack if it says 80 degree or 80% humidity and it's 82. Like,
well,
no. That's not how this works.
The other thing is, if you can follow a care sheet to the letter, and I'm not going to say you're wrong if you're successful. Yeah. And I mean, the one of the best examples is, God, I had his name before I started talking, and I just forgot it. Don't have car accidents, kids. It's causes brain damage. Black Hills Serpentarium, Terry
Phillips. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Terry Phillips runs everything, I believe, at like 81.7 degrees or something, incredibly exacting across the board, I think year round, and still breeds everything. So I might not be exact on that. I don't know exactly, but I remember just reading some things that he was writing, and I'm pretty sure it's like 81, 82 degrees or whatever his number is. I do not believe he varies from that, but he has production. He has long-lived animals. He has animals that digest properly. If it works, wonderful.
Yeah.
Again, I can tell you what I do. I can tell you how I have success, and I'm happy to share what I'm doing, but I'm never going to tell anybody what they're doing is right or wrong. That's also, I think, a very bad way to think about things.
Yep. So what do you do, keeping this topic alive, when it comes to feeding? What's your frequency? What's your prey item of choice?
The great feeding thing. So,
we're going down that hole.
With these, I don't think it's as big of a scary topic as the blackheads. I got some hate in the blackhead world from people that don't think you should feed your animals. I don't. We went from morbidly obese animals in the 90s and early 2000s to anorexic animals modern day, and then people like, I used to be successful, then I wasn't successful, then I was, and now I'm not. And I think it's because you swept too far the other direction. It's almost like our politics. We're going too left, too right. Can we just have a medium here? With these, they digest like crazy. Like Drimyrcon, they suck food down. Some of the fastest swallowing snakes you're ever going to see.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And also some of the fastest processing snakes you're ever going to see. And in my mind, if I see a snake eat a food item and have a liquid-based fecal passing a day and a half later, what that tells me is that animal is designed to eat an incredible amount of food and not have the best digestion of that. Conversely, you get like a python or a boa that get like, I'm such a Colubrid guy, I did not really see boa and python turds for a number of years in the hobby, and then I finally did it. I was like, holy crap, they're like little dog turds. It's the cutest thing ever.
They're solid.
That's adorable. Like, how did that happen? Do they all do this? This is crazy. This is so much cleaner. But with these guys, I don't think they're pulling all the nutrients out like those guys are when they're giving you that nice compact dry turd. That's an animal that pulled everything it could out of it. And with tigers and all the fast digesting animals, they're pulling stuff out. The baseline of your question, I only have time to feed weekly. I got a buddy of mine's coming over on midweek, so I feed Sundays. You try to contact me on Sunday, you're most likely not going to get a hold of me because I have no signal in my building. And that's just how it is. The people are like, hey, can you grab some pictures? I'm like, yeah, kind of. I have to remember to do it and then walk outside to send them to you. And if I do it too late, then, well, the mosquitoes in Fellsmere are large. That sucks. But so I'm on. If I don't have him coming to help me feed, I'm doing large food feedings on Sunday. If I know he's going to be in there and I plan on doing the feedings, I do a little bit smaller on Sunday and then again on Wednesday. But smaller is very relative. Like smaller for me is a small rat and a chick, or 3 chicks versus a medium, a small, and a couple chicks if I'm just doing a once a week feeding, because they are not inexpensive to feed.
Yeah.
I am looking at doing a wholesale chick purchase just to be able to get chicks in. I started breeding quail just to have another avenue of food for them. Then the wonderful irony of ironies, Caturnix quail. Yeah, just let me save a bunch of people a bunch of money. You want everything up to 2 weeks old and nothing past 2 weeks, because their head size is so tiny and their body structure is so wide. Besides carpet pythons and, ironically, sulphurus, very few things I have, including 9-foot black-headed pythons, can get the darn things down because it's such a dramatic jump. They can't figure it out. Like after 2 weeks old, they're almost useless to me at that point. Like at 2 weeks, I'm now you're a breeder. I didn't feed you quick enough. So
that's the secret then.
Yeah. So if you're trying to order them, I'm getting up to the point where I'm just going to do day olds out of what I'm producing in excess if people want them. The button quails I'm doing in huge part because the Pilatus are just such not an issue. They'll take any live food item at all, I think, but live rodents are not an issue with them at all. But Sulphurus, Bacillinotus, some of the Drymarchon, some of the carpet pythons, like pretty much everything that's a difficult feeder sees a button quail and it's game on. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing a crap ton of button quail right now. A couple people bought me out the last 2 times I had production up, but that might end up being a button quail breeder instead of a reptile breeder the way things are going. Those things at least produce for me. Oh no, I'm having a terrible year, man. It's ever since I moved, my years have gotten progressively worse. And then people say, "Oh, you produced this and this, so shut up. You did a great year." I'm like, I produced like less than half of what I tried to produce. That to me is a giant failure. I want to be at like 80% to 100% success rate, not the 30 and 40.
I have the secret to that. You just get rid of all these blackheads and sulphurus and Freonax and get yourself some Florida Kings, which are in your backyard, and everything will be fine.
They're not in my backyard. They need to be. If I could find some, I'd almost kind of want to like reestablish them here. Yeah. I wish we knew what was the problem with them down here, but that's a whole nother tangent.
Yeah. So then, is there any difference? Well, let's kind of jump. We'll stay on this topic, but we'll jump to something else.
Jumping in this cup?
Yes.
With me?
Uh-huh. What do you do to get them to breed? And then we're going to then segue once you get to that to taking care of the young, and then we'll get into feeding the babies, because that can be getting them going is a problem. But once they're going, they're going. So, but breeding, how do you go about that?
The real simple answer is you get a really good male.
Okay.
He gets the job done, right? Start there.
Well, because I've got I bought out Black Pearl's Gladys Porter Zoo stock, Mexicanus, the Tom Olympus locality stuff. Which it wasn't a big group, but it's a beautiful group, and they're all that's remaining. And then John Anderman is the only one who was really successful at breeding those outside of Gladys Porter Zoo. And I suspect Gladys Porter Zoo had a good male for a while and lost it and then stopped production. So it's not just male, female, get it going. They, with Sulphurus and Pilatus more than Bacillinotus. Bacillinotus seem to just be all about production. Sulphurus and Pilatus, it seems like the males have to be bigger than your females. They have to dominate the female, and the female has to accept them. So that's why I say you need a good breeder. But not necessarily even a bigger male, but just a male that's big enough to be confident. I think I screwed up with my striped males by introducing them together to a group of potential females, and they fought each other. And the female who was bigger than them, because I was feeding her more to get her up to size quicker. I think she dominated them.
Huh.
Interesting.
They've been terrible breeders. Yeah. But I can take that female with my one 50-50 Mexican Honduran male, and he'll breed her. He's like, yeah, no, I'm the dude. But those two guys, like I posted something about that too. I've tried combating. Combating did not work with them. But then I also, because these Mexicanus are aging out, that's the other thing. Pilatus are not a very long-lived species. Looks like mid to late teens is kind of their age max. Everything that Gladys Porter Zoo produced that went to other zoos, I believe, is now dead. I don't think any of the zoos that had them still have them. Gladys Porter Zoo still has some because John Anderman was able to get a group together to breed them, but he got all the remaining single animals he could find together, got production with Gladys Porter Zoo's animal and Black Pearl's animal, and then dispersed animals back to each of them and kept some for himself. Then I got some from that group as well. But in theory, the proper what has worked for me so far is a cool down in winter. They're all going to be not that I don't brumate. I give them a cool down. I lessen the food. I lower the light cycle.
Yep.
Ramp all that back up, and then when the weather, we get the good storms coming in, but early spring, like not even late winter, early spring introductions, and slam them with food, like obnoxious amounts of food, and hit them with a bunch of humidity, and that seems to trigger them into going. Again, if the male is so inclined. But I also threw some males together this year with the Mexican animals, the Tom Lips animals, to encourage breeding. And I do have, that was when you guys gave me the extra 15 minutes to get ready. I'm like, all right, before I say anything, I want to go just candle these things one more time. I've got some off-white, not quite pearly, not quite strong-veined Tom Olympus eggs. I got 6 of them right now incubating, and that's been my white whale for the last few years because, like I said, the animals are aging out. But to get them going, I had my beast male that breeds everything and my 2 Tom Olympus males. I threw them all together and observed them for a while, and that 50-50 male went right at the female, and I grabbed him out and put him back up in his other cage after. It was like probably 15 minutes in. The 3 males kind of danced with each other. He broke off, went right to the female, like, well, you boys are busy. I'm going to get busy. So I snatched them out because I want the pure Tom Olympus animals, and I didn't see any copulation, but I just left them together, and I ended up getting good eggs out of them. And then I had previous years just tried to do a single pairing, 2 separate single pairings. That hadn't worked the last couple of years, so. But my single male did it with multiple females. The 50-50 male, he's just such a beast. He does it with multiple females. But the one-on-one, they just weren't. They didn't have the drive to mate. I don't know what it was. And then to make matters worse, and my vet buddy Steve Barton will tell me this is impossible to happen, but I've watched it year after year. Seems like the females swell up. I can count ova inside of them. Like physically let them crawl through my hand and count 1 to 7, and then nothing. They go through their pre-shed, go through another shed, give me a extra large poop, and go on with the rest of their year. And it's like, come on. So I'm trying to be very clear that I really don't know what the hell I'm doing. I've just gotten lucky a few times. But I mean, if guys are doing it better or have other ways, please let me know. Like I'm always interested to hear how anybody's doing anything. That's why I'm like, I don't want to ever tell anybody. Like you guys asked me about speaking on some other species, and I said I'm not comfortable. I don't want to nerd out that deep on something I'm not that into. I like the guys who are deep nerds on stuff. Those are the guys I want to talk to.
Yeah.
So Jason, you talk about having that beast of a male. Can you kind of give the listeners an idea on size when you're starting to put these together, on how big you think the females need to be, and what does beast of a male really translate to on snakes this impressive?
His isn't so much a size as an attitude.
that creates size, right?
Yeah. And they have to have the confidence, but they need to be. I would say like probably all species around 4 years old. Seems to be a pretty safe number, and size-wise, over 6 feet. But it's one of those. One thing I've said for years: if you have to ask me if the female's ready, she's not ready.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, I think if you're a good enough keeper, when your female's ready, and you turn to your buddy. Like my buddy Scott comes over; he's the one that helps me. I mean, I'm blessed to have him because I trust him 100%. I can let him go take care of my animals when I'm not here. He's an amazing asset to have, but he came up with as like kind of learning from me, and then I turned to him. I've known him for over 20 years. I turned to him and I looked. What do you think about this female? He's like, someone once told me if you have to ask. I'm like, yeah, shut up. The one terrible thing about him is he has an amazing memory, much to my chagrin.
That's funny, actually.
But it's 100% true. Like every time someone asks you, "Hey, what do you think about this female?" The answer is always like, "She's close, but no."
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, have you ever asked somebody that you really truly respect if a female's ready, and they said yes?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
Yep.
You know, you're just looking for someone else to be the person you can point at and be like, "Well, you said."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Being a teacher, I get, well, you said about 30 times a day, it feels like. Do as I say, not as I do. That's my favorite phrase. Anywho. So then it's funny because what you described is exactly what I do for false water cobras. Like, it's the exact same damn thing. Because it's not really a brumation. I'm not dropping them to 50 or whatever. I just turn the heat panels off. I go from any kind of heat generating light to an LED, and I do that around Thanksgiving, and I roll through New Year's. So it's not even a long time, but it's just a period where they're not warm, and then I drop the food down, and then when they come out, I just bump them back up and slam them with food, and then they make. Well, the thing about falsies is they are. I will die on this hill. They are the easiest snake to breed, to get the action of breeding. It's getting an ovulation, fertilization, and then eggs. That's where you have to do a bit of cycling is to achieve that. Is that kind of how it is with these guys, or is it not?
I don't think I have the success level to tell you what is and is not. I've had a few clutches for sure. Mm-hmm. And the up until this year, every one of those clutches has been followed by the same male. When I say you need a good male, I'm very serious. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other males that have done nothing. Six other males who have done nothing, and one male that's what I mean. He is a beast, but it 6-7 foot long and cycled up properly the year before. Going into that cool down cycle, I think is part of it. They need to be. It's like anything else. They need to have enough body fat to know they can go into a cycle. I mean, there's too much fat in our diets. What's making little girls hit puberty too early? It's universal. All animals. It's a body fat composition percentage that causes maturity. You need the calories available to enter that next stage. So but you also have to give them the calorie boost to stimulate them to, okay, now is the time to do it. I think that's the tropical species. They all, I think, follow that same formula where they're, okay, now the food's here. Let's spit out some babies and make more of ourselves.
No, that all makes total sense.
Yeah, there's no secrets. I wish I had a secret because that would mean I figured something out, but I'm trying the same thing over and over again and doing slight variants.
Well, this has been a kind of a common theme because, I mean, the neotropical species are something I personally have not worked with. But now being, obviously listening to this podcast and then being on this podcast so often, these are some species that we discussed and just neotropical in general, various species. But that seems to be a very common thread there is feed, and they want to breed. It goes with that cycle. So, coming from somebody who's not worked with them, I've now, that is ringing to me because I've heard it for every single one of them at this point. That's the trick.
That's one of the things with these is you do need to support a double clutch because they tend to always have them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All three of the puffing snake complex do at least. And you need, and most of the tropical species of milk snakes will double clutch for you. And then something that, again, it took an old timer pointing out I was being stupid way back in the day when I had a corn snake that I got a trio of corn snakes that were supposed to be males. I was just going to flip at a show. And then I came in one day and a couple of the males were locked up and I went, oh, that's different. But they were like 18-month-old corn snakes that weren't fed heavy. They were probably in the 24 to 28 inch range, which would be way too small for a corn snake to breed. Female didn't know that, so she kicked out 10 eggs. She looked like trash. She looked like she was ready to roll over and died. So being a good keeper, I fed the crap out of her. Being a good snake and a young female, she said, okay, you want more, Daddy? Here you go. Here's a bunch more eggs. Drop a second clutch. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this thing doing? And I was telling the guy about it, and he goes, well, you're the idiot feeding her. I'm like, well, yeah, I don't want her to die. He goes, stop feeding her. Don't feed her for 2 weeks to a month, then feed her. But she's so skinny. He's like, you feed her some more. And I had already started feeding her at that point after that second clutch, and I was already freaking out about it. And he's like, if you start pounding her with food, she's going to give you a third clutch. I'm like, they don't triple clutch, do they? And she swelled up and had 12 ova in her that entire winter into the following spring. And I just was feeding her. Like, I have geriatric animals that I just feed. I'm not going to just dump them off on people or freeze them or whatever when they're no longer useful. This was a no longer useful to me animal. I still kept feeding it anyway because I'm like, this thing's done for. I can't afford it. At that time, I couldn't afford a vet to get the eggs removed or anything. And that spring, I was out of cage space. I went down and bought a bunch of animals, so I threw her with a snow male. First two clutches to her brothers were all albinos. Threw her to a snow male. I got 50% albinos. So if it was head-to-head, I mean, the odds are possible that you could have got 50% albinos, but head-to-snow pairing should have given me the 50%. So my assumption is that the male snow was indeed the father, but she held those ova all over winter, which, again, I talked to my vet buddy, and he's like, yeah, that's not how it works. If the ova were that big and they were distending the animal, they were too big to be fertilized. I'm like, right. But then it happened. He's like, well, no, you think it happened. And it was but I said, okay, well, why did they hold them the whole winter? So I think we got some things that happen with snakes that don't follow the rules. They don't follow the books and the vets. Yeah. But I'm all that to say, for new keepers coming in, if you have a smaller female and she produces for you, don't feed her for a few weeks after she produces. You don't want to trigger an already damaged animal with an additional breeding. I see that frequently. It's one of those other little things that get to me all the time.
Yeah. Yep. Most of those neotropical big colubrids, I don't think Drymarkin does it. I could be wrong.
I don't. No, they do not.
Yeah, but everybody else does it. And when I was working on the book, and I was actually diving into the journal articles and all that jazz, they would a lot of studies where they basically would take animals that were killed on roads or go into museums, and they would dissect snakes from every month of the year, and they found with all of the species that we work with that are xenodontines, which are the Barons racers, musaranas, false water cobras, they all had follicles in them. The girls did. There was usually a peak right at the beginning of spring, and then there was a peak midsummer, which lines up perfectly with when you would expect that to happen. And it was basically, the idea is that they have so many predators down where they live that for the species to maintain itself, if they're having a boom year, they need to put out a lot of young in case the next year's bad. The only problem is in human care, it's always a boom year because we're delivering the freaking mice and the chicks to them literally on a plate sometimes. So they're not dealing with droughts and fires and really bad years. That doesn't happen. So they're going to double clutch
which is
the damn
when
time.
You can support them, but it's also can be really scary to see what they'll do to themselves if you support them incorrectly. There's a level of support you need to pull away from on some of the animals when they're younger or smaller. Sometimes that's something that, unless an old man told me that I was an idiot for being the problem, I would never have even considered that. And I got the gray hair now, so let me be the old man saying, "Hey, don't be the idiot."
Yeah, I was the idiot the first time I bred hognose snakes. When I had one of the girls dropped a huge clutch for one of that, like 20 eggs. It was massive, and she looked like, all snakes look bad when they lay eggs. She looked horrific. Like, oh God, what did I do promoting this? Like, she was just skin and ribs and deflated at the back end. And so I, of course, panicked and was giving her like a small mouse every 4 or 5 days. And then that's too much. I know that now. And she bounced back in like 2 weeks, but I had given her plenty of food and she had sperm stored. And then she produced another 20 egg clutch and she wasn't able to come back from that. And I didn't want another clutch. I just didn't want her to look like death. And now we're breeding hogs, and it's really funny that you bring that up because we just had our first female drop eggs, and she looks like a stack of skin. And I told my keepers at the school, like, okay, she looks like absolute crap. She's getting a small mouse in a week. And they're like, what? I was like, yes, in a week. And we're going to like maybe give her like a couple fuzzies for the next 2 weeks, because if we feed her too much, she's going to double clutch and it could potentially wipe her out. And so,
it's a hard lesson to learn. It's something
you have to learn it by doing it. That's only, So listen to us, kids. There you go. Anyway, all right. So when you do get your eggs, anything special with incubation?
No,
for them?
It's a Colubrid, man. Throw it on a shelf and come back.
There you go. That's basically what we did, but I just wasn't.
Yeah. The low 80s at the absolute most and high 70s is even better. My house I only put it down to 78 degrees because I'm a Florida savage, so it's perfect in my house.
Gotcha.
I know some people like, your house is what?
Yeah.
Turn the fan on. Like, wait, I'm not gonna have it. You have a 68 at your house? Wait, what?
That's my house, Jason.
Yep.
People say they're incubating their eggs in even when I lived up in Chicago, though, I just threw the eggs in a cage that had a heat light. I never had an incubator for Colubrid eggs. I'm always like, really, you guys incubate Colubrid eggs in an incubator? Mm-hmm. Or on top of the fridge? That's what I use my temp gun for. I go find 80 degrees somewhere in the house. So
that's where they go.
Yeah.
Cool. So then when they hatch out, what's the setup for the babies, and then how do you get them to eat?
Well, like I said, Pilatus are a dream for captivity. They tend to just take off right away. I had a couple that hesitated last year, but I think, like I said, I'm doing the button quail. So everything's getting button quail this year because I'm producing so many of them. They're just like such a dream feeder for me. But for the average Joe setup, I just do a real clean 6-quart tub. I get from when I did Amazon tree boas, I learned the little trick with the garden mesh. Cut a little square or rectangle just bigger than the width of your cage or width of your drawer, so you can put it in there like in an upside down U, and gives them something to climb on. Paper towels in a water bowl. Once they're established and I know they're defecating and eating well, then they go to Aspen. And if I plan on keeping them, they go into a terrarium setup where I give them branches. And again, I go Aspen, cardboard hide box, but branches in a water bowl. They're pretty simple. I'm sure there's people that are doing a far better job at them than I am. Some people send me pictures of stuff. I'm like, damn, I really need to up my game. Like that's much better.
We had the only clutch that I dealt with. The little boogers would not eat we couldn't drop feed them, and we had them in tubs. And then once we got them going, they went to the 1818. exocube
Well,
situation.
with them live
Yes.
crawlers. Yeah, you can drop feed them live crawlers like nobody's business.
That's what we found out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They were just destroying anything alive and anything that was dead. We were able to get them transitioned by me holding them in my left hand, and then I had a fuzzy or something and with a pair of forceps, and we did the exact same thing with the yellowtail crebos because they were in the same year, but just kind of wobble, and then you get that pissy strike, and then they would bite and then drop, and then do it again, bite, drop, do it again, bite, drop, and then they would inevitably
You're
bite.
getting it wrong. You're getting it wrong, man. It's bite fling. Bite
yes,
fling.
that is correct. Bite fling. Yes, that is absolutely correct.
If it bites and drops, it's probably sick.
Yep. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
How did you just throw that 8 feet?
Yeah,
come on, man.
But like the previous 4 times you flung it, and then on the 5th, they do that insane bite, and it's gone. It's like not even, you don't, like it's bite, chew, 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 gone. Like that's literally how long it would take them to down the freaking fuzzy.
They're a little sketchy with because they're such a high stress, high metabolism animal. You really do need to get them feeding, and once you got them feeding, you can't miss feeds. They will drop quick if you miss feeds on them. I had that where I lost a couple this past year where I just took had an event and one weekend and something else the next weekend, and it was 2 weeks without food. That shouldn't. They had a couple dozen meals before that. It shouldn't have been a problem. Came back to 3 of them dead, I think. I'm like, what the hell? What happened here? And it just, the rest of them I started feeding them again, and they were fine. But just like that 2 week span was just a little too much for their processing. And I think just snakes in general, or colubrids in general, I won't go boas, pythons, venomous, but colubrids in general, I think are eating far more frequently than we ever give them credit for.
Yeah.
I think far more frequently, but they're just not getting the high fat content items. I've caught plenty of corn snakes that regurgitate multiple lizards where they're out in the night and they'll eat 3 and 4 knolls in one night. And I think that's they go out every couple nights. And you might know the guy, Zach. He's somewhere in the Carolinas, and he does a night vision videos with cottonmouths.
Oh,
you know that?
Well, I don't know if it's it, but there's the guy that does Cottonmouth Acres, and that's Frederick Boyce.
That doesn't sound. This guy's he goes out with a pedestal resting thing.
No, I don't know what you're talking about, but I want to.
Oh no, you have to, bro. Oh my god.
Cottonmouths are my favorite North American snake.
He did a talk for the CHS, and it was mind blowing to see. He did night vision camera, goes out, 0 interaction with the animals, just observes, and watching a cottonmouth sit on a branch all night. I could never do it. I would lose my freaking mind. 8 hours in a swamp, not moving, watching an animal also not move, and then a mouse comes down the Y of a branch, and instead of going on the upper part of the Y, it goes in the lower part of the Y. And here's something he pointed out, and I've talked to other guys, and this is something else, actually, another assignment for one of your poor children.
We're getting it.
This thing's coiled up all night long. This mouse comes by, gets close to where he could scent it, but not close enough for a strike, and leaves. Whoa. This absolute savage of a man sits there for another hour and a half. That snake, an hour and a half later, moves, goes forward, tongue flicks the trail the mouse was on, and then chin rubs his branch.
Whoa.
Leaves. Comes back the next night, goes to the same branch, tongue flicks his chin rub spot, chin rubs it again, coils up again. Then he has another video where these cottonmouths come out, and there's a specific branch. They come out, they chin rub it, and then set up at these little drainage from one section to another. Like this chin rub behavior is observed with all of these feeding opportunities and scenting opportunities. And then completely independent from him, we had a guy come in from Arizona who does hands-off of observation of rattlesnakes and starts talking about how rattlesnakes have a specific branch or rock at their den sites that is their holy grail spot. And if that gets disturbed, they abandon their den sites. But if you watch them, they'll come out and they'll chin rub that. And we see it in captivity all the time. Completely independent guys are talking about this. We see it and they're like, oh, they're cleaning their face because we're human morons, and that's anthropomorphizing. They don't. I mean, yes, they are in fact cleaning their face from Aspen and stuff for sure, but they're doing it all the time after feeds. When there's nothing on their face, they're still doing it, and they're observing it. And then he's like, as far as we know, there's no scent glands in the chin. So what are they doing it? So then I think it was Francis. I don't. Somebody was talking about one of the North African snakes. I think it was Francis, where they emit something from their cloaca and chin rub it all over their whole body.
That's the Lampropheids. The beak snakes do that. The Egyptian false corals do that. Sand snakes do that.
But then they're also chin rubbing. Then there's a definite scenting going on with them that's pretty obvious. So I mentioned, I want to say it was Francis, but I can't remember. But it was somebody I talked to, and they're like, well, yeah, no, these guys do it all the time. That's obvious. That's how they scent. I'm like, but these other animals aren't doing the cloaca scent gland rub on their chin to do this that we're observing. And this guy's got hours. And I asked him, like, in your hours of footage, are you seeing this? But again, that goes back to the whole, how intelligent are these animals? Mm-hmm. How unintelligent are we that we see this all the time and we've never recognized it? And then guys are out there just doing the hardest thing in the world, not touching them and observing them and seeing this behavior consistently over multiple animals. But if I can, I'll look up the guy's name for you. It's got to still be on the CHS page.
Definitely send me that.
The ultimate coup de grace, that whole video he showed us, everything was fascinating. But the ultimate was a cottonmouth is sitting on the side of a stream with running water, hits a mouse, they both tumble into the water, and then the cottonmouth rights itself, hits a branch in the water, does the chin rub, and then does circles that are swimming upstream. It's going less than it is going downstream. He goes, I really wish I knew somebody that knew the right mathematics to figure out if is this cottonmouth swimming the same amount up and down, even though the circles aren't the same size. Like, is his stroke work giving him the idea that he's gone 5 feet, and when he goes downstream, he's going 10 feet, but he's trying to also do just a 5-foot circle. And then the next one was like 10 foot, 20 foot. And the next one was like 15 feet and 30 feet. And then it found its prey and then went up and ate it. But it was every time it completed a search, it went back to the branch, chin rubbed again. Tongue flick, chin rub. So there's something going on there, and somebody needs to figure this out for sure to let us know what we're missing. But I'll find you that guy's name. This is the stuff I love about reptiles, is like we're always learning stuff. And there's so much to learn just by observing, which is why I don't like having animals in racks. You can sit there and watch your animals and see them do behaviors all the time, and it's like, well, wait a second, what is that? What is that little thing?
I know the head rubbing. I've been paying attention to that with the king snakes, actually, because I have one of the nice things about my job is that I'm able to have enclosures in my office. So I have snakes in my office. I've got snakes in my house. I've got snakes in my garage. They're all in vivariums. So if it's a day in Wheeling, West Virginia, I'm going to be looking at snakes for a significant part of it. And I've noticed absolutely unequivocally exactly what you're talking about. My guys have a tendency to do it around their hide boxes. Like the entrance to the hide box, I see them doing that exact behavior where it looks like they're scratching their face. But I know that elapids do that in I feel like Rick Shine talked about elapids doing that in Australia. I could be wrong.
I think everything's doing it. We're just not recognizing it or seeing it. We're not observing without touching, which is one of those other fascinating. Like that's what everybody should. Facebook's killing herp societies, and that's such a horrific thing because I learned so much going to the CHS Herp Society meetings, Chicago Herpological Society, and these speakers that come in, and that's one of the things besides the food of Chicago, that's amazing. Florida food is terrible, but the Herp Society and the meetings and the interaction with these people that come in and have these amazing things they're doing, we just don't see enough of that. And even the journals are kind of dying, and the reptiles and the
Reptiles Magazine put out an issue in the past 2 months where, like, I don't remember exactly what it was. It was a turtle, but it was on the cover, and it was the wrong damn turtle. Like, on the cover. Like, what the hell?
Really?
So,
Yeah. I saw you post about that.
Anywho.
Yeah, poor Russ is rolling over.
Yeah, I know. Russ was dying. Anyway, well, then I think we basically covered everything. Is there any final thoughts you would have on Spilotes pilatus that you'd want people to know? Cautionary tale, anything of that nature?
Getting back to the, captive born, if you can find it, is infinitely better with this species in particular. They are not they do remarkably well. Sulfuris do much worse.
Yeah.
Sulfuris, for whatever reason, when they cut, both of them being big, long, skinny colubrids, do not have a lot of natural body fat to absorb all the damage that happens in the importation process, the dehydration and everything else that happens. I mean, there's a reason we got boas from South America so frequently and so little of everything else. Everything else doesn't have that fat content to handle the stress. And then frequently people want to try to treat them right away when they come in. So if you get wild caught, have a good herp vet long before you buy the animal. And that's US Arc's been putting it out. I don't people actually pay attention to it, but arav.com or .org is such a great resource. Just drop in your zip code and find all that's going to do for you is it's going to find you the vets who are members of the Association of Reptile and Amphibian Vets. And that means they've paid their dues and they've taken continuing education classes in that realm. So it's at least get you a foothold. If people say, I have no vets in my area, did you look? Look at it first. But get you a good vet first, and then don't treat the animal for at least 6 months when it comes in, because you need it to rehydrate. And that's not just drinking. That's breathing good humid caging. Rehydration is a process for them. It takes months. Or skip all that and just get captive born.
There you go. That's a better option.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, people are going to do what they're going to do. People still buy golden tegus and then get surprised that they're not black and whites. I mean,
right.
People are what they are. But in fairness, there's not a lot of captive born tiger rats. There just simply aren't. So if you can't find them, that's the route you're going to go. Just be very careful with them. And also try to pay attention to locality with these, because eventually I'm going to talk Zach into dropping that $50K and doing the species, and we're going to find out that you're crossing species. And
I'm certain you would be crossing species if you did South America and Central America or something like that. There's just no way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And a lot of people do get, and then people are like, well, how do you tell them between the Costa Rican and the South American? Well, not a lot's come out of Costa Rica. If you have to know you got Costa Rica. If someone's telling you, this came from Costa Rica, maybe. If they're selling it cheap, probably not. But Costa Rican animals can look superficially similar. Some people are saying that the South American species have a longer scale than Costa Rican, but I think that's a subjective take on it. I don't think if you want it to be Costa Rican and you're looking for scale length, you're gonna find out it's Costa Rican in your mind. So I don't think that's a good way to do it. I'd go with captive born stuff on that as well, if you can. But just try to keep them within their range. And I mean, I'm saying that while I'm breeding Mexican and Honduran, but by species, by specimen records, I didn't do that haphazardly. I did that because I spoke with John Anderman, who sat there and did the scale counts on the animals in the specimen jars in San Diego. And I want, trust me, please God, I want pure Tamaulipas animals because they're amazing. But Gavin Brink, who is another huge reason I'm into these things, he had crossed them already. That's where my 50/50s had come from. And I just, the fact that male is the one solid, prolific breeder I have kind of made it, everybody else happens to have that mixed locality blood, but they should be the same species when the genetics get done.
Cool. So you want to ask the final question, Clint?
Well, I'm going to ask one question before you hit the final question.
All right. Because I can't wait to ask the final question.
No problem. So, okay.
Great.
For those who have never met Jason,
Yes.
Jason's got like a 7-foot wingspan.
Yes, he does.
So, my question is, you keep all these large colubrids. What would you tell a common person with normal lengthed arms? What kind of tips would you say if they were going to put together a collection along the lines of what you have? Meaning, what are some of the nuances and things to think about, to look out for, to prepare for, that kind of thing when with dealing with large, fast-moving animals like this?
The longest tongs you can safely use, for sure. I mean, I use 30-inch tongs on everything, which is ironic because when I was, quote-unquote, doing my hours for venomous down here, I would frequently not use tongs or use 8-inch tongs because, again, I was a 20-year-old testosterone-filled moron. But now I use 30-inch tongs on everything. I still get bit all the time. But, 30-inch or 36-inch tongs are a huge help because, especially if you have them singularly set up, tapping the tigers. So I didn't really touch on it, but when you go to feed tigers, if you tap on them like mid-body and keep tapping them going towards their tail, away from their head, they'll spin around and grab the food. Wild caught, captive born, that's just their reaction, going towards the tail. You go towards the head, they'll freak out and run away from you. And their diet does vary between rodents and birds. And I don't feed frogs, but I have frog legs. I try not to do frogs if I don't have to. I do them with the dry marcons. I think you were talking about that, Zach. Actually, you got me to go buy another box of them with your stuff.
There you go.
But yeah, I listen to all your episodes, ruining me more and more.
Cool.
But just the big tongs, I think, are just such an important thing for all our animals. Actually, that's one of the things I use. I use the long tongs. I get so many little tricks for different species because I have the tool available, and they're not expensive. It's $20. Like there's so much available now in modern herpetoculture that I don't think a lot of people use all those tools. My building does not have Wi-Fi, so I went out and got the Intermatic, I can't think of the name of it. I can get you the part number you guys are in. You guys probably have a modern house with Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But for the smart plugs, but the one I have, it follows the sunrise sunset that you set it to, but you also get to set your date and your time, so you can manipulate that as you see fit. You can change it to you can follow sunrise sunset for whatever location you choose up and down the coastline. So if you want the sunrise sunset for the Carolinas, but you're in Florida, you can have it. If you want Florida's and you're in, vice versa, you can set it up that way. And it changes daily automatically for you. So that's like when I moved my first year, I moved to this place. I don't know why or how I possibly forgot that I had timers and everything. Like I moved and I forgot that I wasn't flipping switches. I moved in for like 9 months. I'm out there flipping all my power switches on daily. Like it was a normal thing. And I'm like, I had a terrible year because some days they would get 6 hours of sun or light during the winter. And some days they'd get 14 hours or 16 hours because I had a terrible work day. And like I'm like I couldn't figure it out. And my buddy Scott's here and we're talking about it. And I'm like, my timers, man. What the hell? Where are my timers? And I went in my other building and I found a whole box of timers. I'm like, why? How did I not know this? Like what? But in the midst of looking for the timers, yeah, no, it was like this is a couple of years ago and it still just kills me. I get so aggravated. But in the midst of looking for my timers, I started searching for these. And I ended up finding these other timers instead that are just amazing because I don't have to do anything. And I have a couple of them that are set up to my time. And I'll walk out there in the morning and it's dead nuts on every time. I walk out there right at sunset when I get ready for work, or sunrise rather. When I get ready for work and I walk in, the lights kick on right as I walk in the door. It's like perfect. So use the tools available to you, and you don't have to spend a ton of money. And the other thing I'm hearing about now, I'm sure you're using the crap out of these, is the little data loggers.
Yeah,
everybody's using those. I need to implement them. Yeah,
I love the Govies.
I need to start using those and trying to figure out what my animals are doing. I'm not having good luck. I'm doing something wrong, but I might be controlling too much. My something wrong might be that Ron St. Pierre just was like doing his guru crap he does to me every once in a while. He's like, you have too much control. Your building's too good. I got it insulated. I got the AC. I got all this control. And he's like, yeah, that's the problem. Chaos. Chaos is needed.
That's funny.
But yeah, if you don't, I'm working too much to track it personally, but if I think I'm going to grab the Govies and just see what my actual temps are in the enclosures to try to figure out, am I too hot? Am I too cold? Am I too stable? What is my issue? But again, it's just all the tools. There's so many tools available nowadays. It's incredible what we have, and I don't think people use them fully.
Yep. No, the Govies are great. I mean, they're Bluetooth, so I just use them mainly when I'm trying to cool things down in the winter, because we have the winter up here, and it got down to like 0 for a week in the corner of my garage where everything goes. Yeah, when I walk into the garage and it's cold, it's like, oh shit, is everybody dead? And then check the Govie. Nope, we're at 46, which is pretty cold, but not that no one's going to be in any danger if they're brumating. And then I just pepper the entire corner. It's ridiculous. It's totally. I think I had 12 Govies set up.
Okay, don't go that far into tools.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no.
There's happy mediums.
Massively nerding out. And it's in like a 4-foot wide spot. I just had like up by the ceiling and then down every like 3 feet to the ground. But yeah, no.
Well, I mean,
I love it.
With the pythons, I went and I temp gun where my blackheads were laying eggs one year. And going back to Gavin Brink, Gavin was just we unfortunately lost him, but Gavin went by Mace Montana on Facebook and totally mind screwed people constantly to where he would say something as Gavin and people would reference Mace and tag Mace into the conversation, and Gavin's crazy ass would argue with himself on a topic. And he'd tag me and be like, hey man, or he'd message me and be like, hey man, this guy's an idiot. He just, but anyways, one of the things years ago when I had the pythons and he was good friends with George who put out the herp stats, and he was like, man, get your herp stat, set it up in your incubator, set it to 87.7 degrees, and then what you need, it has a night drop. So do a night drop, not a big night drop, but your temperature, you figure it's going to drop probably a degree and a half, but let's go 1.7 degrees down. I'm like, done. I'll do it. Like, I'll give it a go the first time. I didn't know what to do with the blackheads. I think it was carpets, whatever. He suggested it. I'm like, it made sense to me the way he ran it through his head. He was a brilliant guy. I did it. And what I noticed was the humidity would raise in my incubator when it dropped to 86. And then when the heat kicked on in the morning and jumped back up to 87 quickly, it was only a degree and a half, but that was just enough to kind of stir the humidity. So going back to Govies, like people are doing maternal incubation or seeing their turtles build nests or tegus or whatever, we should be sticking these gobies in where they're doing these nests. Like, you can pull your eggs if you want, but throw the gobies in and let's see, are we really, are we doing what we should be doing with these eggs? Because sorry, but I skipped out my own point. When I temp gun my eggs where the female was laying it, turns out 87.7. I go back there at night because she, even though I pulled the eggs, she's coiled up on them. I went back in, and this was years later, by the way. I go in there with the temp gun, lift her up, temp gun underneath her, 86 degrees. Like, he just nailed it as half tongue-in-cheek, half serious, and nailed it exactly what this animal was doing in my enclosure, where she chose to put the eggs and where she chose to try to incubate the eggs I stole from her. So, like, we have these tools now that you can see exactly what they're doing. And maybe we can refine things, because now we have the herp stats are amazing. You can make those temperature gradients as you want them.
Yep.
You can.
Oh no, the ramping.
Everything's available.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All right.
We're in such a world, man.
Oh, well, let's end with talking about that world, and we ask everybody this, and I cannot wait to hear your answer.
you think he's going to have an opinion on this?
He may have an opinion on it. So, obviously, the world of herpetoculture that we find ourselves in has changed. And it is currently changing, and it is an insanely different landscape than it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I just always use that as my reference point, because that's when I was in it before I left it and came back. But where do you see herpetoculture going in the private sector, at least? And plus, you live in Florida, and nothing's happening down there. Like it's just all calm and cool and collected down there right now.
Unfortunately, we got a guy that thinks that he should attack us on his bid for president, and that's terrible. There's guys who know guys in the FWC down here who are just like, dude, we don't want to do this stuff. This is coming down from on high from their commissioners. The commissioners. So one of the crazy things about Florida is the commissioners are all appointed by the governor for the FWC, and all the commissioners donate money to the election campaign. And it's not just FWC; it's every single commission down here that governs anything. The people that are appointed to those positions are all the donors. I mean, it's not like it's a big secret, but it's whatever. So yeah, we're kind of screwed down here until whatever this election cycle does. Hopefully, we can get rid of Rubio at some point, if people can just, enough herpers can get together and be like, hey, let's not vote for this moron so he quits putting all these federal bans on us. Laws notwithstanding, we're in still, I think, in an amazing area where we have so much room for growth and improvement with the animals. I think we're in a great state at this point. Again, with the ball pythons bringing huge money in, they brought all these other tools for us in. We have an amazing area to be in. We just need people working on some of the obscure stuff, whether it's colubrids or geckos or whatever else. So before we lose them to, a lot of these populations are just disappearing, unfortunately. And we are a part of that. We can't pretend we're not. I don't know if it was you, Zach, or another podcast talking about this, but one thing I would love to see people do in the hobby as a general thing, and something that actually go back to Gavin again, he always did. When he made a sale, he would tack on he would straight up tell you, I'm tacking on $25 for US ARC, or part of this sale, $25 is going to US ARC, $25 is going to a conservation thing. And when I was in the CHS, I ran a couple things. We had a big event, whatever. Conservation, I would say to people, I'm donating around $1,000, or not CHS. I was just the spearhead on that. CHS was donating $1,000 to 4 conservation groups. Please let me know what you have for conservation groups. And bless our community, I would get US ARC. I love US ARC. I support the hell out of US ARC. I think Phil's doing an amazing job. I think US ARC Florida's doing a good job. But US ARC is not a conservation group. People in this hobby cannot identify conservation groups. That's a problem. We should be donating to conservation groups.
100%.
That's where the Ducks Unlimited comes in. That's what it was. You were talking about this on somebody else's podcast. That's where it was. Yeah, Ducks Unlimited does their thing. That's a bunch of hunters. But they're donating and they're buying the wetlands. They're doing it. We have a ton of money in this hobby, and the big guys are donating their money already, and they're doing their thing. The little guys need to come out and do it and get their voice out there. Like I have no issue donating to WC biologists with all of the. I mean, that's probably gonna get like 30 people telling me they're never gonna talk to me again and just unfriending me on Facebook for suggesting such a horrible idea. The biologists are out there doing their job.
Yep.
So, I mean, they're trying to protect our wildlife. And guess what? A bunch of those biologists, you see them at Daytona, they're behind tables, they're selling you animals that are amazing, that they bred themselves. They happen to have a job where they work as scientists for the government. The government's doing what the government does. That's not the biologist. Are some of those biologists having to say, hey, this sector has some idiots in it, and some of those people that are idiots have too much money and not enough sense, and they're doing a lot of damage to the environment through their carelessness, which people know exactly who I'm talking about in certain things on that one. I just don't want to get sued, so I'm not going to say a name, but yes, the government had to step in on some people down here, but a lot of this stuff is our own fault. A lot of the things that are a problem down here are because we do support people who need to not be supported, but with money or with popularity, with the fact that they bring in a bunch of animals, we still support them. If we can clean up ourselves, which everybody says no one does.
Yep.
If we can clean up ourselves and not support the guys just because they happen to be the current ones that are flipping the stuff that the other company that no one wants to buy from is bringing in, so you're still buying from them. There's a handful of really bad seeds that maybe aren't bad individuals, but their overall mentality is just so detrimental to the hobby. We should not be supporting them, but people do.
Yeah.
I mean,
there are plenty. This is done all the time in conservation. Ducks Unlimited, I'm glad you brought that up. When you teach conservation biology, which I do, that is like the classic example where hunters are oftentimes viewed as like, how the hell do they like animals? They blow them away with guns. All righty. But there's so much more to it than just that. And it's a resource. And for them to build their resource, they needed wetlands. And so then they start literally figuring out ways and lobbying and getting money to build wetlands. And now, however many decades later, it's a well-known fact that the wetlands we have in the United States and parts of our country, they exist because of hunters. Like, that is the reason we have those wetlands out in the Great Plains and things like that. And they weren't ditched and drained and turned into more agricultural settings. And I just always think about herpetoculture, and I'm like, we're the people that love the damn snakes. So we put money towards the snakes outside of our snakes, and then it makes it really hard for conservation, for those commissioners and things like that to be like, well, they're all bad, because then you can be like, well, look at this, and it's it shuts down the argument.
Chicago is a amazing example. The Chicago Herp Society, something I was never actually involved in personally. We ran Reptile Fest, which would get 6,000 people through the door, and 6,000 people, and it was a completely educational event. No animals were for sale. We just educated the public, which were mostly families. Cool story. There's 12 million people there. 6,000 people don't matter. What did matter is a handful of our members would dedicate their weekends. Chicago's got this thing called an alderman, which is basically the mayor of a town or an area of the city of Chicago, a neighborhood, and each of those neighborhoods have an alderman. And they're truly just their own little city. And that's truly basically the mayor. But the alderman would throw a street party. And a couple of our people would show up to all of those alderman parties. And they would have reptiles on exhibit. Chicago has a ban on African clawed frogs because they're in the waterways. That goes back to, I think, like the 60s. There's a ban on crocodilians. and the state has other bands that they brought in. Chicago has no other bands. I think Venomous are also banned there, but there's a reason. And it's because there was a good political connection between the CHS doing a very minor detail, just showing up and educating and showing these individuals these animals aren't scary. There's pictures of aldermen with reptiles in hand going back 30 plus years, 40 years, because of the individuals in the CHS who did the groundwork, the footwork. We need to do more of that and more of the Reptile Fest ideas where we come together, volunteer our weekends. You don't make $1. You go out and you bust your ass. You ruin your back. You destroy your feet. You don't make money, but you educate. And you put out if we could do it in Chicago, I get it's a giant thing. That same format can be used elsewhere. And that was the CHS's great secret. We would raise $40,000 to $50,000 that weekend, and we flip around and put it into grants committees and funding conservation projects and running the society for the next couple of years. We did that year after year. We got to the point where we had too much money. We were a not-for-profit, and we were exceeding our money limits. We had to just donate bigger amounts of money.
Yeah.
Our grants went from 500 to 1,000 to a couple people got 2,000, people got 5. We had to get rid of money because our event was so popular. But we were doing that while having a political grab and everything else. So there is a formula for this, but it takes the community coming together. And I joked about it down here. I'm like, I would try to do it down here, but I know too many people down here, and too many people down here don't like too many other people down here.
Yeah. And
myself included. I'm an incredibly opinionated asshole. I understand that, but I feel I'm in the right when I have an issue with somebody. If I go against somebody, I said this the other day. I haven't screwed anybody in this hobby in over 20 years except myself. I screw myself all the time with how I rip myself off paying people their shipping and stuff. Like, I'm selling these quail, I'm losing money on that, but I'm trying to do right by my people that I deal with as customers. But there's people that once they rip me off, I'll never deal with them again. And that kind of blocks me from doing it. But somebody who's a little bit less of a grudge holder than myself can run with an idea where they put together projects where we get people volunteering to go do a Daytona size event for education.
Yeah.
Make it a fundraiser. Flip that money into conservation, and now we're handling all sorts of stuff. And here's the crazy part: if anybody wants to run with this idea, if you're a not-for-profit and you're donating money, every news station will have you in there and run a free advertisement for you, run a free segment, because they love to have newscasters with reptiles in hand. They won't do it if you're profiting, but if you're a not-for-profit, free advertising. We were on every news station in Chicago. We were on different radio stations. It was such an easy reach out, but people don't realize that's an avenue you can run. So please, somebody else run that somewhere in the country, multiple places in the country. That's what we need in this hobby is to get back to that, because we all got in doing that. I think both of us, or three of us rather, probably did the Boy Scout outreach things and things like that.
Oh,
right?
God, yeah.
Yeah. And then you're a bad example, Zach, because you're still teaching. So,
yeah, I kind of do that a lot.
Outside your store, have you done any real outreach? I mean, you're kind of like this a long time, like I've been.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed here in the Evansville area. We used to do something very, very similar to along the same lines what you were mentioning earlier, where we have a local nature preserve. And once a year, several of the local breeders, it was reptile invasion is what was called out there. And we would all go out. There was no selling allowed whatsoever. The most you could do is hand a business card. But we would bring animals, and it was the largest fundraiser for the nature preserve every single year, just one weekend. There was always a large albino Burmese that was brought, and you're paying $5 a pop to take a picture with it. And we had a blast. I loved doing that because it took the pressure of a sale out, and it was just a day of you're hanging out with your friends because we all knew each other. and you're just talking about reptiles all day long, and you're laughing, you're cutting up, and knowing how much money you were bringing in for the nature preserve. So that's one. And then we have our local herp society that used to be active. When the reptile invasion ended, it ended because the curator, that curator left, another one came in, and they didn't see the value in it. Well, after about 2 or 3 years of it being down, they realized they got a new curator, and that one instantly wanted to get back in. So the Herp Society, we jumped on it and brought that back too. But over the past, I would say, probably 3 years, that really has gone to the wayside. I think that a lot of the individuals involved with it have become busy. Life gets in the way of life sometimes. And so for me personally, what have I done? The only thing that I would say that we do and we do regularly, other than simply attempting to educate anybody that comes in into the shop, we have gone now and done presentations to, I think we're up to around 12 or 13. And that's only, we would have done more, but I'll limit it to one a week. 12 or 13 presentations in local schools, and it's ranged everywhere from preschool to, I now have a set every 8-week rotation at our local community college, doing large presentations to their bioscience class. And, my whole thought process is just, it's the one that we all have. The more that people are around these animals and experience these animals, the less likely they are to kill them. When they see them in the yard, it's that thought. It's the, it's not as bad as I thought. I may not like it. I may not want to go pick it up, but they'll leave it alone kind of thing.
Yep.
And so it's bit by bit. And does that work for me as a shop? Absolutely. Because every time I go, obviously I'm passing out materials, and inevitably at least one customer comes from that visit. And the thing that's crazy, the part that I really enjoy, and we don't charge for this yet. And when I say yet, it's not a money-making thing. I've been tossing the idea around over the past month. I was waiting for the school year to be over, and we're there now, because I think that next year what I'm going to offer is a $50 fee, 25 of that being donated to USR. And 25 of that going into a pot for us to utilize for, like you said, some type of conservation piece. Don't really know what I want to do with that other half, but in the event that a school or a daycare is unable to pay that $50 fee, we'll still come do it. We'll do it anyway. But it's just that way we can help spread a little bit further than just the class that's in front of us. But the thing that's so neat about it is I'm getting called and emailed at least once every 2 or 3 days by another school, by another organization that has heard about it, that has seen it posted on Facebook from one of their friends. Hey, we've seen that you guys do presentations. Can you please come here and do one for us? And it's exciting. So it's not a grand scale thing yet. We're still so damn busy with, we're not even a year in yet, right? August is our 1 year anniversary. So there's still so much going on, so much to do. So at the moment, it's that little thing. It's that couple hours out of a week to try to make a difference more locally. And hopefully that can end up spreading to something a little bigger. That's kind of where we're at right now with it.
As long as it's done right, it can be huge. You don't know what impacts you're making and who's in front of you, or whose kids there, or whatever else.
A funny side story, and I'll just kind of throw this. So my wife was actually doing a presentation because I was under the weather, and she went to one of our local schools, and she said that the teacher brought up a student and introduced the student, and the student's last name was Bryant. And she says, and just says, his parents are Kevin and Kelly Bryant. And I don't know if that rings a bell with you guys, but it didn't ring one with my wife, but I know exactly who they are. And so my wife just kind of stood there looking at her like, okay. She says, well, they own Rodent Pro.
Oh.
And she said, yeah, and she says, and Braxton, wants to give you something. And, handed over a gift certificate from Rodent Pro where they had heard we were coming to do this presentation and wanted to help us out with our huge feeding bill every month, out here. So I just thought that was awesome. I reached out to Kevin and thanked him because it was just such a great, unexpected gesture, and I thought that was neat. So it's just cool when you put the good energy out there, it comes back.
Yep.
It comes back. It may not be that day, it may not be that week, but you put enough of it out there, it's going to spin around. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what we need to do more of is get get the good energy out there, and then start kind of pushing down the negative energy that seems to be what we talk about far too often because it's ever present. But yeah,
you can't break the people that's one thing at Reptile Fest. I'm sure you guys see the same thing. It was always so funny. People would come through, and a couple would come through, and it'd be this like big tattooed, mean looking, whatever, the manliest man you can picture in your brain, and he would macho-ly tell you who's not touching that damn snake.
Right.
And then the mother would step forward, terrified, but because she wants her child to not be afraid and to have that education, she would touch the animal. And I always thought it was so amazing that the women, women are just always infinitely better than the men in all things like that, just would put themselves in a position that they're completely uncomfortable, and the macho-ness of the man wouldn't let them do that. And just like one of those kind of weird, sociological things you're watching happen. But you're not going to change some people, is I guess my point. But other people, for their children, will frequently open their mind, and that's kind of our way in, is doing those outreach for the kids to kind of break some of the parents, because we would have mothers pretend to touch snakes, like fake pet them, just to get their kid to pet them. It's just like, lie to him if you want to, that's fine, but at least you're trying.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, very, very cool. Well, this has been absolutely epic and wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
This was a fun one. A fun one.
You're going to change the title to Tangent Ratsnakes Spilotes. I apologize.
A bunch of other shit.
It's all good. We're definitely going to have you back, man, because I think that the world needs a free and axe episode for Shizzle. But we started with the most common member of the group. So there we go. But if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
They're not mad at me for terrible suggestions like funding biologists. Just Jason Hood on Facebook and Instagram at Snakes Unlimited _Jason Hood. I supposedly have a web page that I haven't done anything with, and it's terribly outdated, but I may have said something smart 10 years ago on there, so you can check out snakesunlimited.com if you can find it. I can't find it. So half the time I go to search it, it's not there. Then I search it again. Like when they want money from me, I look and it pops back up. I'm like, okay.
There we go. And where can people find you, Clint?
You can find me on Facebook, Clint Bartley, Instagram, Metazotics LLC, as well as on Metazotics on Facebook, and Metazotics.com. Boom.
So you want to find me, Dr. Crawdad, Instagram, Zach Lofen on Facebook, and then look me up online. The ever-present shameful plug for grad students. I might have a little announcement in a couple episodes, so I'll leave that teaser out there. And, it's going to be a really long time before Clint and I record again. Less than 24 hours. But, we're banking these episodes now because I don't know what the hell my summer's going to look like once the field season really hits. And, Clint's just buying up 100+ snake reptile collections here, there, and everywhere. So
I'm putting the brakes on that for a bit.
Yeah, there you go. And we also want to, as always, thank Morelia Python Radio Network. Eric, of course, the Podfather, one and only, is the reason we exist. There's another network that always refers to their leader as the GOAT, and I'm going to challenge them right now and cause a tiny bit of drama because Eric's literally been doing this longer than anyone, so I would claim that he may be the GOAT. But anywho, with that being said, doesn't matter what time of day you're listening to this, whatever time of day it is, hope it's a good one. And with that, this has been Colubrid in Colubroid Radio. Thank you, Jason. And yeah, we are out.